We're all really excited to be here because this is a chance for all of us up here to get a chance to speak about something that we're really passionate about, and that is, employee resource groups. For those of you who don't know, these employee resource groups within organizations have been around for about 50 years. I think Xerox gets credit for launching one of the first employee resource groups back in the 1970s. And as of today, about 95% of the Fortune 500 have employee resource groups. Companies that do have them tend to have between 6 to 8 employee resource groups, so they're starting to become, we're starting to have them represent many different constituencies. The minimum penetration rate that companies try to achieve when they have employee resource groups is about 8 to 10% of their employee population being a member of at least one ERG. And then finally, we're starting to see the investment in these ERGs going up, with the national average being about $8,800 per year for every 100 members being allocated to these groups. So you're starting to see that they're starting to become pretty prevalent. And what we're going to talk about today is not only the experiences of these young ladies of kind of being, strong stakeholders and leaders of their employee resource groups, but we're also, continuing on to focus on action like Claudia wants us to, is we're going to recommend and things that we advocate for with these ERGs. Personally, if I can, before we get into some of the questions, ERGs have played a very big role in my life. My parents are originally from Mexico, so I'm Mexicano. I was born in Texas, so soy tejano también. But I grew up in Minnesota. Yeah, not a lot of Minnesotans here, right? And that was my experience, right? Growing up in Minnesota, not a lot of Latinos, right? So when I joined corporate America, I struggled a bit with my sense of identity, right? My parents would tell me, "Oh, mijo, be proud of being Latino and represent." But I had a lot of my coworkers early on tell me, "Oh, Robert, don't do that Latino thing, downplay it." But fortunately for me, some of my earlier employers had ERGs. And I can say without any hesitation that my experience in ERG, they just helped me speak with my authentic voice, be much more comfortable in my own skin. They elevated my visibility, capability, and promotability. And that's why I've dedicated my career to helping not only folks who are doing ERG work above and beyond their day job in many cases, but also to help organizations like many of you represented here today to help create the conditions that nurture their success. Okay? So speaking of that, maybe Jenny, we'll start with you. I mentioned how ERGs helped me kind of on my own personal journey. What role do you think ERGs can play within organizations to help their Latinx employee population feel comfortable with their sense of identity, with representing who they are? What have you seen, and what would you advocate for?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say 4 things when it comes to empowerment: education, mentorship, and sponsorship. I think that plays a really key role. And Claudia, we have used your data up, down, left, right, sideways, diagonal, in all the activities, not only for Hispanic Heritage Month, because we are a year-long asset, not just a 1-month highlight. And this is something that we use to educate, empower, and I've seen really a change on people knowing, okay, I'm a Latina, and this is the value that I bring, which is amazing. We also need to be very intentional in highlighting career successes, highlighting those leaders that we have, putting a flashlight on them and making sure, hey, sí se puede. Yeah. And the other thing that we play a key role, and it all starts here, is in all of us being our authentic selves. And I know it's easier said than done. It took me 15 years of career to get that. And a lot of friends of mine make fun of me because I go under intentional unicorn in social media, but that was my story. Like, I felt like I was a unicorn, standing out, like sticking out for the wrong reasons, and I tried so hard to knock it down, to put something over and covering it, and it wasn't until I said, that's my superpower. Yeah. And when I owned it, then that's when everything started to happen, and I started to thrive. And that's what I do every time I have an opportunity, like, be your authentic selves. They have to see it so they can believe it. Yeah. Then we can be authentic and achieve success in our career.
Yeah, and that's true, absolutely true. Pamela, I'll go to you, but do you ever get Latinos in your organization, maybe elsewhere, where you've told them about the Latino ERG at the Port Authority, and you've told them about the benefits of being a member, and they're like, no thanks, I don't want to. What has been that experience, and what do you tell them if they don't want to get involved?
I tell them my story. I think it's important to be authentic, to tell your story, to tell. I'm sitting here because I led my Hispanic EBRG in my organization. And I tell them it's okay. It's okay, you know. There's certain things that we all have to grow, right? You know, whether it's networking better, speaking in public, getting together to talk about challenges, and not only demanding representation in an organization, right? Because those are the things that ERGs work in. And I hear the word demand today, but we can also bring solutions. And that's the thing that people forget. Ask, why do you think women aren't going into engineering? Ask us, and we'll tell you maybe why. Maybe in this organization, there's not enough training, there's not enough this. We are that pool of employees that can provide those solutions to an organization. So when people don't want to be part of an employee resource group or a Latin, it's hard to sometimes articulate the things that are not on paper, right? That you develop professionally, you get to meet other people that maybe in your role, you just don't network that way, right? You want to be able to meet other people in the organization that will help you do your job better. That's another thing that people don't talk about. When you network differently, you have the opportunity to say one day, I'm working on something and, oh, let me call Robert. He might know the answer to this. You just remove 10 steps from the process, right? Productivity, efficiency, and just work better.
Yeah, but Rosia, so say I'm an employee and I've heard all that, right? I'm like, yeah, but I'm super busy, right? Yeah, but I've heard those ERGs are only for Latinos who need help. I don't need any help. I don't want to be labeled. What's your rebuttal to that?
Well, that is a very good question, because when we were founding Mi Gente at Dow Jones, that was the biggest struggle for us. We actually, we don't have a very large Latino employee population, so we were creating this group and we were excited because then you had people attend, but then you would reach out to someone and go, oh, did you want to join Mi Gente? And they go, I'm good, which makes you work even harder for me, because I think I was then falling into the same trope of there's one paintbrush for us all. So I think it really makes you as an ERG leader truly understand the needs of your members and trying to change the narrative. Because for them, it was, I've been doing fine on my own. I don't want to start asking questions of, oh, there's a Mi Gente group, why aren't you joining it? And then, of course, you have other employees who mean well, but sometimes when they ask those questions of, oh, so you're part of this group, so tell me all these uncomfortable questions about you now. So it was a lot to take in, and we had to ensure that there was going to be sustainability in the group, that there was going to be a difference, there was going to be credibility, and we were going to get the right exposure. And I would time and time tell our members, this is our moment to be able to make the change. And we're not going to be able to do it if it's a group of 5 or 15. It involves every one of you, and it also is giving that space for people to be their true selves and not, quote unquote, your typical Latino stereotype. So it took a lot of work. It took a lot of understanding our members. And honestly, your one-on-one time, you can't substitute just having a cafecito with someone who's struggling with it. It goes a really long way. And I think it also empowers you as a leader to understand, I'm making these connections that we're not making elsewhere. Now, how do I elevate that conversation?
Yeah, one of the things I often tell Latinos who maybe have that response is I remind them, say, well, Mira, you're going to move up within the company because you're smart and you work hard. You're smart, you work hard. You're smart, you work hard. But sooner or later, you're going to get to a level where everybody else is smart. And everybody else works hard, right? So you have to find a way to differentiate yourself from all the other smart, hardworking people in the room. And a lot of times when I meet now Latinos who aren't in the ERGs, when I ask them, how are you different? They're like, well, I'm loyal, I'm dependable, I'm honest. I'm like, that's so boring. Like, but just think, if you run the ERG, you can say, well, I develop a strategy, I manage a budget, I lead a team, I'm a more inclusive leader, I have a much bigger network. So kind of building on that, Ileana, what role do Latino ERGs play in helping to accelerate the promotional velocity and upward mobility of their members?
Yeah, so to add to her point earlier, one of the things that we've done within LinkedIn, within our Hispanics of LinkedIn Alliance, is drive awareness around not only the fun things that we celebrate around the cultura and our music and our food, but also highlight the challenges that the Latino market faces, right, around colorism and difficult conversations and how we're judged by our appearance and the color of our skin. And it's to highlight, hey, we're not just about the fun stuff, but we really want to have conversations around all the different things that encompass the Latino market. And we have found that a lot of folks have been taking to that and really gravitating towards the content we're putting out. And as a result, those who weren't members of the ERG previously are now raising their hands to be involved on a greater scale, not just be a spectator, but to actually be a part of our leadership team, to volunteer for opportunities. So we're seeing a heightened awareness and engagement within the ERG, which is fantastic. To answer your question, in terms of what can ERGs do, one, it's crazy to me that about 31% of the labor force is African American or Latinos, but yet only 4% is in senior leadership roles. That means it's going to take like 100 years to have some kind of parity, right? And that to me is wild because, I mean, for all the panels that are here, we are powerful and we have the power to do it all. And so there's a clear gap there. And so companies need to invest in these minorities or underrepresented groups in ways of developing award and recognition programs. LinkedIn actually just rolled this out this fiscal year, which is July to June, where they are compensating global co-chairs $10K for every year of service in the role. Which is huge. It's not about the money, it's about the recognition. Like, you are doing all this work in addition to your day job, which I'm sitting in the global co-chair role. I will tell you, it is a whole nother day job. And because we're passionate about the work and there's a lot of work to be done. So we can't just be like, oh, check the box, an hour today. No, it's like there's a whole community of Latinos in these doors and outside of these doors that are relying on us to change the game. And if we don't do the work, nothing's gonna change. Be a part of the change that you wanna see is how I see it. We also have invested in developing leadership programs and investing in mentorship and sponsorships and getting executive leaders to be more visible or be more aligned with our global leaders. And so we're giving them access to folks that they normally wouldn't have. And to your point before, you can be smart and work hard, smart, work hard. At some point, it's about who you know. And how can you get a competitive edge against other folks in the room. So.
Yeah, well, because we've heard, right, you know, for many of us in the Latinx community, we tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored, right? We have folks talking to us, we don't know there's enough people talking about us. But sponsors, you know, they have to pick you, so that's all about visibility and exposure, right? So Jenny, tell us, how does, you know, involvement in an ERG elevate that visibility and exposure? So hopefully we will get noticed by somebody.
Yeah, absolutely, and that happened to me. Like, I work hard, and I got so embedded in my bubble that I became invisible. And I saw everybody moving up, I'm like, what, not me? And then I realized, I went to actually a leadership program that they talked about that. After you get there, everybody who is there is also kick butt. Can I say that here? Yeah, so they're like really good rock stars. So what separates you is visibility, sponsorship, and things like that. And that's whenever it clicks on me. And whenever you learn something new, you can do one or two things. You can say, well, that's not fair. That's political stuff. But it is the reality. And then what I said is, the question I asked myself, what can I do that I can help the company and I can also benefit from it? And for me, it became really obvious to belong to the ERG. And not only as a board member, but I roll my sleeves. And then I say, how can we accelerate and develop the Latino talent here? Let's be intentional with it. And I'm telling you, by that, not only I increased my network, and then I started seeing, oh, here where all the Latinos are in this company, because I didn't know where they were. But then I started developing a skill set that I wouldn't develop in my own normal job, because it was a different problem to solve. And then people saw me in action. People saw me as a leader. And that, honestly, I've done 2 career changes. I'm a chemical engineer. I started manufacturing.
Art.
Started in manufacturing, leading sites, went to the business side, then went to the innovation side, and now I'm in HR in a very meaningful job about leading global talent acquisition.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. You know, Ileana, before we came on, we were talking about not only can the ERGs help us be our true authentic selves, but, you know, Mr. Llamas just before the session talked about the importance of unity, right? Because I would argue that there is such a thing as intra-Latino divides, right? Where sometimes, I'm blonde hair, blue eyes, you're Afro-Latino, you're indigenous, or sí hablas español, pero no hablas muy bien, so you're not a real Latino, right? Or, well, yo soy Mexicano, you're from somewhere, so how can the Latino ERGs create more of that unity so we have even more of that communal spirit, so that way we can leverage our numbers and our growth to have more powerful influence?
First of all, I'm Dominicana, so let's represent
Yeah,
Dominicana.
okay.
For one, we have to acknowledge the depth and breadth of the Latino culture, right? We are not a monolith, and we have to acknowledge that we are all so different, and we were raised different, in different households, different parents, etc., different beliefs. You know, my grandmother used to tell me, "Ponte pelo lacio, straighten your hair, it looks better, it's more professional." So of course, I was conditioned to think I need to straighten my hair to be professional and to get the job that I want and advance. And to tap into what you said earlier, I realized that my superpower was this. All of this. And once I tapped into that, and once that was supported, I actually started advancing faster and owning who I was and tapping into, ooh, this actually works. Let me leverage this to my advantage, and let's see how I can do, you know, better for myself, but also how can I give back now that I've identified this? Because that 18-year-old girl that's about to graduate from high school shouldn't have to experience what I did for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I work with hundreds of companies and their Latino ERGs, and I would say about 80% of them, of the Latino ERGs I work with, are run by a Latina. So, you know, we're starting to see that Latinos are helping to drive this narrative, you know, this influence that our community has. Pamela, kind of going back to you, we talked earlier in the program about, you know, connecting with consumers and marketing. What role can Latino ERGs to help companies more not only understand us, but how to connect with us from an economic perspective?
Well, you have to think of us as, before being employees in an organization, we're consumers, right? So I come from the public sector, and our organization uses us as, you know, when they're trying to think of how to update a facility, you know, be culturally aware, sensitive. This is a survey pool to ask, right? Before anything, I could tell you what I feel like when I go through an airport. I can tell you the things that are missing. I can tell you that the signage isn't clear. There should be in two languages, although it is, but it's still not clear. You know, we really provide a different perspective into the business. We provide a different perspective into the business, and an authentic one, right? You know, you can survey a community, right, with a survey, and it's going to say this and that, but first you got to get people to take a survey. First you got to get, you know, these are just little things. And why go so far when within an organization you can get that information?
Absolutely. And more than elevating awareness about consumers, Rocio, do you think the Latino ERGs can help raise awareness of managers, our non-Latino allies, just to know more about us as a community? Because a lot of them think we're all Mexican, right? Or a lot of non-Hispanics think, or they'll say things like, well, you don't look Latina, right? So is that a role that Latino ERGs can play to help dispel those myths and get rid of those stereotypes?
Yeah, I think absolutely. So something we've done within Mi Gente is create Mi Gente Talks, where we brought in thought leaders in their industry to have real conversations about things that were important to the business with the lens from not only a Latino speaking on it, but the importance of it to the market. But then also at our employee level, we created and mimicked the same thing with our own stories. So for example, we've done presentations on what does it mean to be an Afro-Latino? What does the word Latinx mean to us? Okay. We've been put into focus groups to talk about the difference of the generations within Latinos, and I think that's so important because we are meeting our managers, we are meeting our leaders where they are, and we're speaking their same language with the Hispanic agenda. And I think a lot of that is helpful because people do mean well, but people don't do their own research. We've said it from time to time, like, the data is out there, but we need to bring it to them, and that's what we've been able to do with ERGs, is bring exactly what they're looking for, the little gem that they're missing, and have it come from the ERG. And I think that's been able to dispel a lot, and I mean, every Mi Gente talk that we start, everyone explains where their family origin is from or whatnot, and you slowly see people go, I did not think that. Yeah. I had no idea. I still say Chile, and people go, what? Yeah. So it's nice to be able to embrace that and be part of it, but then also from a member perspective, you feel empowered. You really start to realize that's your superpower because what you think everyone knew about it had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, we know Latino ERG, kind of building on what you said earlier, Eliana, we don't want to be seen as the food, flag, and fun folks. Yeah, we definitely can have fun, we can celebrate, but one of the ways I think you dispel that is leveraging metrics. So Jenny, may I'll go to you. What sort of metrics should Latino ERGs be capturing to more effectively tell our story, to highlight the impact that you have, what metrics should we be capturing?
Yeah, it's so funny. So you told me, you shared that some of these ERGs are really old in terms of age, and so is ours, but it's like a journey and we continue to grow up. So when I first started in the company about 20 years ago, it was like a child and a toddler. So the ERG was our playtime, our party place to go to and eat good food and have the end of the year party. And then we move to the teenage, early adult, and say, okay, wait a second, we can bring something, we can help. How can I help the company with employee development and employee acquisition, talent acquisition, retention, et cetera? And then that's when the metrics started. But these are foundational metrics, right? So these are things from retention, acquisition, promotions, employee engagement. I'm telling you, that's a tricky one because it doesn't tell you the story. Because I know the Latinos in my company were struggling for a while, but in our pulse survey, we were the happiest people because we're so grateful for our opportunity and we're so optimistic and all of that, so that really didn't help me. Yeah. So it wasn't until we did Cafecito Chats that we got the real truth on that and we started to drive action.
Yeah, I love that.
And then the next phase of adulthood is where I'm super excited because it's like where can we help the business improve health outcomes and also improve business outcomes. How to measure that? That's tricky. So that's where we're starting right now and super excited. One thing I'm super excited really quick in terms of metrics, and yesterday somebody said it starts from the top. We did something that is called aspirational metrics. So this is something that you evaluate for every function, every role in the company. What is the situation inside? What is the situation outside? What's the availability of talent? And let's put aspirational. You know how hard it is to move 1%? But every executive committee member was accountable for those metrics, and we have meetings twice a year with them for them to report. And whenever things are that clear, that visible, and that level of accountability, it drives action. So we have moved from 3% to 7% representation, and then in acquisition, we have moved from 3% to 10%. And we're now Diversity Inc. #3 for the Latino executives in my company.
That's awesome. Those are metrics that matter, as we call them. This past Hispanic Heritage Month, I had the privilege of doing 42 keynote speeches for Hispanic Heritage Month. And part of that was because Latino ERGs brought me in to speak. Ileana, if you could talk to this, what role do Latino ERGs, can they play in helping to bring in more Latino-owned businesses and vendors and Latino suppliers to their organization?
Yeah, for Hispanic Heritage Month this year, actually, a lot of the activations that we do, we try to bring in small business. Not just use our internal resources, which are fantastic, but how are we going to get these other businesses exposure if we don't do the work that we say that we want to do? Mm-hmm. And so we took action. And so we outsourced graphic designers, we outsourced speakers. We have Beatriz, who I think was here earlier, maybe yesterday, but she's fantastic. We work with We Are All Human organization. So we work with other organizations and several partners that LinkedIn currently has to build out a framework for Hispanic heritage that we want to take into next year. And what we thought really worked was bringing external parties to bring in that breath of fresh air that are not drinking the blue Kool-Aid the way we do, but that could add to it. And I think that was really important because one of the pillars of focus for us as an ERG is obviously focusing on our members, but also how are we making an impact outside of our doors? How are we helping to elevate small businesses? How are we able to give Latinos more of a voice on the platform? And so we work with also our product team in helping them identify what are better ways that we can eliminate unfair bias on the platform. How can we attract more Latinos onto the platform and get more content creators on there? And so there are different areas that we really focus on to be more intentional so that way we can make a bigger impact on our almost 800 million members on the platform today.
I love that, love that. You know, if I can give you each maybe 30 seconds, a minute, and Pamela, we'll start with you. What do you think is next? How are Latino ERGs maybe 5 years from now going to be different, hopefully in a positive way, and how do we get to that? What recommendations would you give to kind of keep pushing Latino ERGs to that next level? Yeah,
I think for companies listening and for everyone listening, you really need to invest. You need to invest in training for your employees, for these ERGs, the employees who voluntarily took on an extra job. In addition to the daily job, these are the employees that you need to invest in. You need to invest in training, exposure, and I think within the next 5 years, or for some organizations who are starting their ERGs, and for our organizations who have ERGs since the late 70s, you're going to see that they're going to become the focus of an organization when creating programs, mentorship programs, career mobility. All of these, the ERGs will be that active focus group that you tap into when making these decisions.
It's already happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Rocio.
I think what I would say is, one, don't underestimate the power of the ERG. Don't underestimate the high-performing talent that you have within those groups. And I think also is taking them away from the ERGs and also spotlighting them in positions of teams. So there's so much. ERGs become think tanks. They become an avenue for innovation. Why can't those be actual structured with a bigger budget, with more of these promotions, with more of these senior leaders? You know, it'd be great to see in 5 years that there are these projects blooming out of ERGs that then become sustainable teams that live on not just project-based, but become teams that are developed around these ERG leaders, around the Hispanic market, about consumers. So I think it's elevating them and removing them from just being seen as an ERG leader.
Excellent.
More budget, yes. More
budget,
resources, yes, because we want to roll out bigger programs. I think for me, it's to be intentional and inspire action, and make sure that we're all aligned in terms of helping to improve equality and fight for racial justice, and demonstrate your commitment. Your employees should never doubt if you are committed to their well-being and their advancement, never. And I think the last thing I would say, because I said a couple things earlier in terms of acknowledging that we're all so different and we experience things so differently, is to create a culture of inclusivity. And you said this before, a couple of us said it, in terms of when you're authentic, you perform better. You can bring your authentic selves to work, and you can feel like, this is me, and I'm doing really good work, and that's being recognized and praised. That's not the norm. It should be the norm. So let's work towards that. Each one of us has the power to influence change in our organizations. Whether you are an ally or a part of this Latino community, you have the power to create that change. So make it a priority to do so.
Love that.
Awesome.
Love that. Jenny.
Well said. And only two things: become a true business partner, not just an employee resource group. Like, amplify the impact you have and learn from the best. So he has I don't know if you know, I'm going to plug for you here, a new book on employee resource group, which is amazing. And don't think that you have to work by yourself. I was just working with Bristol Myers. They are like now, I think, in the adulthood phase, and their ERG leaders are full-time employees, okay? So think differently on how can we do that and drive input. So let's work together. Juntos somos mucho más fuertes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things I definitely advocate in the book, and by the way, you're each going to get a copy of the book.
I would like a signed copy, please. Thank you.
I'll get you a signed copy, not do it.
It's worth more.
But two things. One is definitely leverage these Latino ERGs as a talent engine. So not only as a mechanism to groom future leaders, but also as a destination for your existing leaders, right? So that's why we're starting to see greater alignment between talent management initiatives and employee resource groups. So I think that's one of the reasons Bristol Myers Squibb is able to have those full-time roles, is because of that alignment with talent management. Secondly, continue to invest. LinkedIn, kind of put a stake in the ground when you all said, hey, we're going to pay our ERG leaders 10 grand. Uber does something similar, and a few other companies, but it's still more the exception than the norm. If we're asking our ERGs to help with Latino representation, with recruiting, with connecting with Latino suppliers, with elevating awareness, with helping Latinos be their true authentic, if we're asking these ERGs to do all that, we need to compensate them to kind of demonstrate the value that they give to their organizations. So thank you, ladies. Thank you,
Thank you.
all of you, for having us here today. Great job. Great job.